This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Any questions, guys, firstly, that I can address before I can get started? Anyone, any questions that I can take before we can get started? Anyone, any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Go ahead, please.
Sir, I went to the the documentation virtual network appearing something.
Okay,
Yesterday, I read one point something. I'm not understand that. Can you please explain me what
sure.
is it? So
What's the
the
point that you're reading about?
the traffic between virtual machines in the paired virtual network is
Mhm.
routed directly through the Microsoft backbone infrastructure, not through the gateway something.
Yes, it is directed
So
through the
what
Microsoft
exactly it means?
backbone.
What exactly it
Backbone.
means Microsoft backbone.
Did we discuss about what Microsoft Backbone Network is when we were doing something called as service endpoints?
Service endpoint. No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So Microsoft Backbone. What really happens here is that let's consider this. Now you have a network here, and you have a virtual machine inside one network, and you have another network inside which you have another virtual machine out here as such. And what did we do is that we paired these both networks so that these both networks can, or these both machines can actually start talking to each other. So we did a virtual network to virtual network peering. Now, as and when you start doing a peering, right? Yes, please come in. As and when you start doing a peering, this is what happens. When virtual machine 1 tries to communicate with virtual when virtual machine 1 tries to communicate with virtual machine 2, it doesn't talk to the virtual machine 2 over the internet. So internet route is completely avoided. So you have the internet here. So virtual machine 1, if it is not peered, if there is no peering, it goes to the internet. It uses the internet to make an outbound call, and from the internet it goes ahead and talks to, let's say, this particular machine provided this machine allows internet traffic. So it has to work both. It has to work both ways. But when you do a peering, what happens is that VM1 now goes ahead and talks to VM2 with an internal network, meaning this is your network, this is your network, and both have, let's say, a connectivity between each other. Now the internet is avoided, and this communication is called as an Azure backbone, meaning this communication happens over a channel or happens over all the cables or all the internet cables that are laid down by Microsoft between their data centers. Because here you have S2S2 and here you have North Europe, right? So they are
Yes.
in between these data centers also. Microsoft has its own cables, right, to connect with each other. This is Microsoft's own cable. We call it as an Azure backbone network.
No, I think it's a secured cables.
These are secured cables, correct? Between only, and these cables are only for Microsoft and Microsoft customers who are using Azure, Office 365, and all these things out. So this is called as an Azure backbone network. And when you establish a peering, right, it goes over your Azure backbone network out here as such.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Got it, sir.
That's
Sir,
what
and
it
what
really
about
means. Hmm? Go ahead, please.
what exactly the meaning of gateway something, sir?
Which
Gateway,
one?
sir.
Sorry, where did you see that?
Gateway.
Not through the gateway over the public internet. Gateway is nothing but, see, every time when this particular virtual, sorry, every time this particular virtual machine, right, talks to the internet, the traffic has to go out and, let's say, hit the internet out here. Now, every time the traffic has to go out, there is something known as an outbound IP or outbound gateway IP, meaning it's nothing but a point through which the virtual machine talks to the internet out here. So that's what they're telling, is that it doesn't use the gateway, but rather it uses the intranet, or it rather uses the Azure backbone network out here as such.
Okay, okay, sir.
Yes, any
Thank you.
more
I got
question?
you.
Yes. I didn't get you. Can you come again with your question? I didn't get you. Connectivity. You mean what is connectivity? What is connectivity? Just connecting to virtual networks. See, again, I am not connecting virtual machines. I am connecting virtual networks, and this is a peering, and that is a peering connectivity is what you're calling. That's it. So, is that your question? Yes. Okay. Is any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions? Okay. So let's begin. Let's see. So, see, until now, what we were doing is that we were creating virtual networks and we were creating subnets inside the virtual network, and then we were creating virtual machines, isn't it? So, we were doing all these things out. Virtual machines and all these things. And this virtual machine can be a web server, it can be a DNS server, it can be any type of a server out here as such. Okay. So, virtual machine, the reason being you are utilizing it for some kind of a utility, meaning you can provide this virtual machine for your development team so that they can log into this virtual machine and they can start working on their projects and all that stuff. Oftentimes when you are working with client products, right, the client will not allow you to download their softwares on your local machines out there, on your laptops out there as such, because of security issue, because of a lot of things. They would not really allow you to download all these things out. So what they'll tell you is that they'll tell you, take the IP of the machine, log into it. Once you log in, then go ahead and let's say start working. You cannot copy the data from this machine into your local machine. They will block all those things out here as such. So it is much more secure. But there's one issue with the way that we are doing this. What is the issue is this? See, when you create a virtual machine, you get an NIC card, you get the NSG, you get a public IP address. Do you get a public IP address or do we create a public IP address?
Do we create a pipeline?
We create a public IP address, which means public IP is optional in nature. If you create a public IP address, let's take the public IP address here. If you create a public IP address here, both the public IP and an IP from your subnet, which is nothing but your private IP address, both of them get attached to your NIC card, and the NIC card gets attached to what? The virtual machine. So the virtual machine has, for example, if I have a virtual machine, it's taking a lot of time to create this out. If I have a virtual machine here, and let's look at that. Now it has a public IP. It also has what? Private IP. Private IP is mandatory, meaning as and when you attach a NIC card, that NIC card goes ahead, sits into a subnet, takes a private IP, gives it, because this is the address where your machine is actually sitting in, or this is the address of your machine inside your virtual network. So each and every component or each and every service that you put inside your virtual network must have an address. Simple, very simple. You are staying in Hyderabad. If someone asks you where are you staying, you tell your address, right? Same way, when you ask this virtual machine where are you staying in the network, it's telling I'm staying here. This is my address out here. But you can optionally also reach out to me publicly, meaning over the internet, in this particular IP, let's say in this particular public IP address out here. But again, this public IP is optional. When you start working in a company, they won't give you any public IP address at all. You won't get a machine with a public IP at all. Forget about it. There will not be a public IP to the machine at all. If you have people working in real time, they'll explain you. They won't see the machine in the public IP. you have something called as an Azure policy. What a company does is that it's pure administration again. At a subscription level, they implement something known as an Azure policy. What this policy will do is that this will not allow you to even create a public IP address at all. That's how they restrict you. Why is the restriction? Very simple. If you have a public IP address, if you have a public IP address here, imagine that you are sitting in a coffee shop and working on your virtual machine. Okay, you have your credentials, you have your ID password, you put in your ID and password. Imagine that someone gets this ID and password, and someone sees your ID password and etc. And very simple, they can take your ID password, they can take the IP address, and very simple, they can log into the machine from anywhere in the world. They can do that, provided they have an RDP and they can grab all the data that's inside and all that stuff, which is a huge security concern. So this is never allowed. A public IP to your machine is never really allowed. This is something a company doesn't allow you. So forget that you have a public IP here. You are a developer again or a DevOps engineer. You only have a private IP called something like 0.0.0.4, something like this, a private IP address out here. My question to everyone, just think about this, is that can you do a direct RDP to a private IP out here? Yes, no, maybe.
No,
Yes,
you cannot do that.
we cannot
Without
do that
peering, you cannot do that.
without peering. Okay, that's what we were discussing, right? You cannot directly go it into a private IP address and do the RDP. The reason being, see, when you're trying to do an RDP session or when you're trying to talk to this particular machine, right, there is something called as a TLS session that gets established, transport layer security, and your NSG controls who can talk to this machine, how can they talk to this machine. And by default, an NSG rule is telling that if you're not a part of this particular sorry, if you're not a part of this particular virtual network, you cannot really speak to this particular machine. You cannot really go and let's say talk to this particular machine over a private IP. But how does the NSG know that I'm not a part of this particular network? Any idea there? How does the NSG know that my laptop is not a part of this particular network?
I think inside that inbound rules are there. Na?
Right, inbound rules are there, but how does this identify that I am not a part of this network? Yes, yes, this is the security group. The
That
security groups has rules telling that people who are a part or people who are not a part of this network cannot talk to this particular machine. This is what the security group really tells you. But how does this particular sorry, how does this particular, let's say, network security group rule know that I
That
am not a part of the network?
that and the end user IP address will not connect to the net card.
Exactly. End user's IP
IP
address
address
will
is
not match with the network IP address. Correct. Exactly. That's right. Which means that if I say, go to Google and say, what's my IP? I have a 27.6.35.84. Now, my question, let's go here into the notepad. This is my IP address, which is coming from my router sitting in this particular institute. So I'm connected to the internet over this particular router out here. What is, sorry, what is the IP address range of your virtual network? Something like 10.0.0.0/16. Yes, no, getting it, guys? This is
Yes, sir.
the IP
Yes, sir.
address range. Please go ahead, please. Okay, this is the IP address range of the virtual network. Some example address range out here. Now tell me, guys, as a part of this particular IP address range, what is the first IP? 10 dot 0 dot 0 dot 1, or can I say 0? First IP address. What can be the last address? 0 dot
0.0.255.
255. Can I also say that you also can do something like 10 dot 0 dot 255 dot 255? Because these two
Yes,
numbers
we
can
should.
change, right?
Yes,
So the
yes.
range, right, will be 10 dot 0 dot 0 dot 0 to 10 dot 0 dot 255 dot 255. This is the range of IP addresses that I have. Is my IP a part of this particular IP address range? Is my
No,
IP? No, because my IP is starting with what, 27. Very simple. This is now an alien IP address to this. This is an outside IP address to this. Sorry, this is an outside IP out here. Pravalika, can you please go on mute, please? I am getting a little bit of echo at your end. Thank you. So this is an outside IP address completely. So you are not allowed to make an inbound call. No matter you have an NSG rule, no matter what you have, you are not allowed to make an inbound connection with the private IP of a machine from the public internet. This is not allowed. Then what should I do? What do you all think that I should do in order to make sure that I talk to this machine over a private IP? Because now, let's see the options. You cannot create a public IP address. Okay, creating a public IP address is completely not an option for you. So forget about that. So now tell me, what are the other options that are available for me right now? VPN, good point, VPN. But what exactly is a VPN? What exactly do you mean by a VPN out here?
Actually, they will provide one app like ping ID or
Hmm,
security related code. So based on
yes,
it, that will be connected to our mobile code.
good,
So
good point.
based on our
Yes.
mobile code, we can
Hmm.
use that code and we can enter into that network,
Network,
office network.
exactly. Good point. So what is VPN? Is that Pravalika has a very good point. Is that they are going to provide you a software. Who is going to provide you? The company where you're working. So when the company, when you start working, right, they'll give you a laptop. That laptop or the desktop will have a pre-configured software called as a VPN. Will have a pre-configured software called a VPN. I'll just put this here. Yeah, come on. Will have a pre-configured software within that called as a VPN, virtual private network. In AWS, we call this as VPC, virtual private cloud. In Azure, we call it as VPN, virtual private network out here. Both the things are the same thing out here as such. What does VPN do, or what does VPN help you do? Is that VPN helps you connect with this particular machine directly over its private IP address out here, which means as in when you go ahead and let's say sign into the VPN, your IP address will be changed to an internal IP address out here, and that's how your NSG is allowing you and all these things out. But again, VPN is a very big concept, guys. There is actually a lot of things that goes into on how do you configure something known as a VPN out here as such. So the entire journey, right? It starts by creating a resource. Okay, let me give it a second. Okay, give me one quick second out here. Okay, fine. The entire journey of let's say creating a VPN starts with something called as a virtual network gateway. There is a resource called as a virtual network gateway out here. So if you click and create on this one, right, what it does is that firstly it asks you what is the subscription. Secondly, it's telling resource group select a virtual network to get the resource group. So wherever your virtual network is, I'll go ahead and create a, I'll go ahead and let's say create the virtual network gateway in the same resource group as such. So in my case, this is my virtual network. I have a subnet inside this particular virtual network, and this virtual network is essentially giving me an isolation. It's giving me 4 different walls out here to secure my network as such. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Just imagine that. So I have 4 different walls out here as such. Everything within is secured. Now, what a VPN gateway or what a virtual network gateway, expects you to do is that firstly, it expects you to go ahead and create an empty subnet. Let me put this in. We call this subnet as a gateway subnet out here. You can only have one gateway subnet per a virtual network. So if you go back to your virtual network, right, and go into the subnets, do you see something called as gateway subnet out here? If you create this out and save this out here, you can only and only create one gateway subnet per a virtual network out here. So now it's done, successfully added. Do you see, can I add one more gateway subnet? Can I do that? Oh, no, if can I have one more, can I add one more gateway subnet out here?
No.
No.
No, it is
It's
disabled.
grayed out, which means that there is only one gateway subnet per a virtual network. Say, let's say you want to add a normal subnet, okay, and call it as a gateway subnet. Do you see the name entered matches with something else and etc. Even if you don't have a gateway subnet, Microsoft will not let you create this one. Create with this particular name. You can only and only have one gateway subnet out here as such, which means that this particular virtual network is expecting you to go ahead and create one more subnet called as a gateway subnet out here, and then we start configuring something called as a virtual network gateway. So if you click on that, I'll say create a virtual network gateway. It's telling virtual network gateway, helps you create a VPN options and all that stuff. Let's check this out on a very high view. Subscription, sorry, subscription. You choose your subscription out here, resource group. You select the virtual network resource group out here. Give a name to this, something like sample gateway or something like that. Some name. Very importantly, the gateway subnet and the virtual network, or the virtual network gateway and the virtual network, has to be in the same region. We'll say S2S 2, and then select the gateway type to be VPN. We'll talk about what is express route. Then the VPN type to be route based VPN type out here. And now here, select the virtual network. As and when you select the virtual network, do you see it's taking the virtual, it's taking, let's say, the gateway subnet out here. It's taking what? The gateway subnet, and then it's asking the public IP address here. Now it is telling what is your public IP address. Okay, fine. It's telling what is your public IP address. You can give something like demo IP or something like this, and then you can say review and create. So what you're doing essentially is that inside this particular subnet, you are provisioning a resource called as a virtual network gateway. So let me get that. Let's see virtual network gateway. Do I have a diagram for that? Fine, it should be somewhere. Yes, you are provisioning a resource called as a virtual network gateway out here as such, and this virtual network gateway will have a public IP address. This is the only resource that will have a public IP address out here as such. So let me put a public IP address in here, and this is allowed. Why is it allowed? Is it more secure? Definitely it is more secure. I'll talk about that. So this is going to have a public IP address out here. So I'll just put this apart. I'll just delete the VPN right now, and now I'll tell you. So this will now have a, let's say, something called as a public IP address out here as such. This is something that we do on the Azure side. It will tell me where we will tell it that you have something called as a gateway subnet, a public IP address, and so on and so forth. And to create this gateway subnet, right, it will take around 30 to 45 minutes. It's a very big resource. This will at least take 30 to 45 minutes in order to just get created this out. It's a very, very big resource out here as such. And once you create it, now you need to tell what are all the users can connect to this particular gateway subnet. Though the gateway subnet has a public IP, anyone, let's say, just cannot go ahead and let's say connect to this. Just like a virtual, see, like a virtual machine, unlike a virtual machine. In a virtual machine, what happens if you have a public IP? I can give this public IP to anyone. They can just go ahead connect to it. It's not the same with, let's say, your gateway subnet out here as such. There is something called as a configuration that goes into a gateway subnet, which means not everyone having this public IP, even if I give this public IP to someone, they cannot connect to this. No matter what they do, they cannot connect to this until and unless there is something called as a point to sorry, there is something called as a point to site configured. There is something known as point to site configuration. Point to site VPN configurations in Azure out here as such. What really happens is this. See, as a company, I reach out to someone known as a certificate issuing authority. A certificate out here. How does it really look like is that, see, your computer has by default pre-installed certificates with it. There's something called machine certificates and all these things out here. What a company does, or let's say I'm a company called Microsoft, I go to a different company called Cisco or someone like that, and I ask them to provide me something called as a TLS certificate, transport layer security certificate out here. They'll say, okay, fine, we will charge you something. This certificate also expires every year. We'll go ahead and let's say renew the certificate also. And what this company does is that this company gives me or gives my organization this particular certificate out here. And my organization gives this certificate to the IT team of my, let's say, company. What they do is that they extract something called as a certificate data. The certificate has this, now gets a little technical, so please follow and please let me know if you do not follow something. This certificate has something known as a certificate data inside it, just like a file. It will have, let's say, an encrypted data within it, just like it look like, a very big file out here. So if you go here, I can just show you how it really looks like. Let's see next steps. Okay, let's see configure. See if I have the configuration here. Just gateway and all that stuff. Let's see. Sure. So it says configure a point to set VPN connection using what? Certificate based authentication. So we just scroll down into this one. And let's see how it looks like. The certificate looks something like this. It's a .cer file, dot certificate file. This is the entire data. So when a company goes ahead and gives you the certificate, this certificate is called as a root certificate out here. This is called as a root certificate, which only your IT team of your organization has. The IT administration team of your organization really has out here, or the Azure administration team of your organization has out here. So they take the certificate from an external provider. They say, okay, fine, we need a certificate, or they can create their own certificate. Anything is okay. And once they create the certificate, it's called as a root certificate out here. And once you get the root certificate, right, you can do a right click on that and it will look something like this. If you open a notepad, this is now called as a certificate data. You can copy the entire data. We just copy it, and what do we do is that there is a place there is a place inside your virtual network gateway to add the certificate data. So we add the data here and save it. Once you add the data here and save it, you will get a software called as a VPN. It's nothing but an executable file. Software known as a VPN out here. You get that software, and whichever are your client laptops, meaning your developers' laptops, you take this software called VPN, install it in each and every machine. Each and every machine right now will have the software known as a VPN software installed. While you're installing this software, right, the VPN will ask you, can you give me the certificate data? Can you give me what is your certificate data out here? You already have this. The same thing got, let's say, installed inside your VPN or inside your virtual network gateway. They'll take the certificate data and they'll put it on each and every machine. Now, what happens is that when you try connecting to the VPN software, it will look like a software out here, guys. You know, it will just go ahead. If you just say VPN, it look like something like this. You can go ahead, say add a VPN and connect to it. Once you hit the connect button, right, your system will talk to the public IP address of the virtual network gateway, and the virtual network gateway will say, okay, fine. Can you show me what is your certificate data? It'll ask your system, can you show me what is certificate data? Your system will present the certificate to, let's say, that particular VPN, and this virtual network gateway will validate it whether both of them are matching or not, because the virtual network gateway also has that particular data. Your machines also have the same data. It will match it and it will say, okay, fine, you know what, now as and when it matches, it will establish something called as a tunnel. This is called as an encryption tunnel or encryption channel or tunnel, you can tell this, which means you just have a wire on top of which you are insulating it so that if you touch that wire, you don't get shocked, right? Same thing happens with data also. In IT world, the same thing happens with data. You establish something known as a transport layer security, which means people on the outside world cannot come here and grab your data here. Means they cannot hack you. They cannot easily go ahead and hack you out here. So now see, if you want to if you want to connect to this public IP, can I just use my machine to connect to this? No, unless I have the VPN configured. Who will configure the VPN for me? The company itself. This means that this is a better security. This entire configuration is called as a point to site connection. Point to site VPN connection out here. Point to site VPN out here as such. Wherein the company is telling you that, okay, fine, or wherein, let's say, the organization is telling you that we will go ahead install all these things out here, give it to you, and you can go ahead using that particular VPN software. You can talk to your resources inside the virtual network over a secure tunnel, over a secure tunnel out here, and that is what we need to look into on how do you configure something. Firstly, we need to understand what is point to site VPN Azure. You need to firstly understand what is point to site. This is like core networking. This is like core networking out here. Advanced concepts, which are pure administration in nature, pure administration, but it is really good if we can understand this out. So it's now telling what is point to site VPN and how do you configure point to site VPN out here as such. It's telling step by step procedure and what to do. Again, if you see, these are different client laptops, desktops, and etc., which are over a secure tunnel or a secure channel talking to your VPN and getting inside your VNet out here. This is the entire architecture diagram, and this is going to tell you what do you need to do. It's telling firstly create a VNet, secondly create what, a gateway, third it's telling what is the connection type and all these things out. Then it's telling how do you create a VNet, how do you create a VPN gateway, and if you just scroll down right further, it's telling you generate certificates. See, in our case, we are not an organization. We do not have a tie-up with an organization called Cisco or someone who can give us a certificate. But if you cannot, or if someone cannot give you the certificate, you can create your own self-signed root certificate, which means that if you go into this one called generate your own certificate out here, right, using PowerShell, it has certain commands. Just copy these commands, paste it in your PowerShell, and you can create your own certificate out here. So you can go ahead, create your own certificates. We can use those certificates. Once created, we can use those certificate. And if you come inside your VPN gateway, there is something called point to site configuration. In here, you just need to go ahead, say what is your certificate data, copy this out, and paste it as a root certificate out here inside your virtual network gateway, and then configure your, let's say, now we can go ahead and configure the VPN out here as such. This is on your laptop out here as such. Now, the issue with giving a demo on this one is that, see, it takes a lot of time. I need to firstly configure a virtual network gateway. That will take about 45 minutes, which means one session is gone. After that, I need to configure my VPN. I need to configure my laptop. That will take another hour. So it's a huge configuration out here. So the issue here by giving a live demo is very difficult. It's very difficult to go ahead and give a live demo. So what I did is that I recorded the session completely end to end on how do you configure from the very start, from the very scratch of it. This is one of the sessions that I really, let's say, won't be able to do something like a live demo session out here. So I've recorded this out. I'll send the link across. So what you need to do is that you have a video file here, point to site.mp4. Click on this one. I'll firstly give you the link here. Let me go here. I'll give you the link, and my request for guys online is please take this link and please post it on the WhatsApp group so that people coming offline or people listening from the mobile can also go ahead and download this particular lecture. So please do that. Just go here, click on that particular link. You will come to this page. Go to this file called point to set mp4. Click on this. You'll have a download button. Just download it like any other lecture, and you'll be able to listen to this. And also, if you look at a couple of things, I have mentioned what is the errors and etc. And I've also mentioned what is VPN, how do you, let's say, go ahead, get the PowerShell script to generate your certificates and etc. What are common errors and all these things out. In the same link, you have a readme.md file. Click on this, and this will tell you a couple of things like what is VPN, how do you configure it, how do you generate certificates, how do you go ahead and do the procedure out here. I've explained the same thing in video also, but just in just for you to not go ahead and, let's say, Google it out, you can come here, take the links out here, and configure things out here first, as such out there. This will give you an idea of something called as a VPN concept out here as such, on how do you go ahead and establish a VPN and all these things. Again, while you're configuring a VPN, right, while you're configuring a VPN out here, sometimes it might give you an error because we are doing a free trial subscription. It is not a premium subscription out here that we are doing. You have to delete the VPN, you'll have to recreate it, you'll have to do it multiple times in order to get it right. So keep trying it. But the entire idea here is that you should understand the theoretical understanding of the concept. That's good enough. The max an interviewer would ask you is how do you go ahead and configure this out? Can you just give me the steps on how do you go ahead and do this? And that too, these questions will come up when you are applying for an Azure security engineer or an Azure administrator. In DevOps interview, you normally don't go ahead and ask this out because this is not a DevOps role. This is a pure administrator role out here as such. But in case you're interested to go into administration role, you can go ahead take this out and understand this. And even if you're not going into an administration role, even if you're going into a DevOps role, right, it's good to have an understanding of how this works, so that just in case something happens tomorrow, you can troubleshoot the issue out here as such. Okay. Is any questions still here? Yes. The certificate should be issued by the company. So every year you have an expiration for the certificate. The certificate will expire every year. So certificate should be issued by another company, or you can create your own certificates. Yes. Any more questions here?
Sir, if we create gateway subnet under the virtual network,
Yes.
so it won't, that virtual network, it won't give from that pool, right?
The virtual network won't give from the pool. Can you come again, please? I didn't get you.
Means if you create the subnets under the virtual network, means out
Yes.
of 251, if you create one more, that means the count will be reduced. Na?
Yes, the count will be reduced. That's true.
So if you create the
So
gateway subnet, also it reduce the that
yes, definitely.
count.
If you create a gateway subnet, now the thing here is that in a
All right, right,
normal
got it,
subnet
sir.
you see that in a normal subnet you are able to see that there are 250 IPs because one I gave
Hmm.
it to my virtual machine. But in a gateway subnet, right? Do you see any IPs here? You cannot
No, sir.
create a virtual machine inside a gateway subnet. The only thing that you can create inside a gateway subnet is a virtual network gateway itself. The virtual
Gateway.
network
Okay.
gateway will occupy the entire gateway subnet. The reason it occupies the entire gateway subnet is that there is a concept called scaling, which means that this virtual network gateway subnet, right? It can scale up or scale down depending upon the number of connections that you establish to it. And also, this is a very costly resource. The pricing of a gateway subnet or the pricing of a virtual network gateway is really costly. Virtual network gateway, if you look at the pricing rate, it's somewhere like this. Okay, per hour. If it's a basic one which we go for, the price is 3 rupees per an hour approximately, which will give you something known as a bandwidth, meaning 100 mbps per second or 100 mbps per second out here. That's the speed of, let's say, the connectivity, and maximum you can have 128 client computers connected to it, meaning if you're a very small organization with only 100 employees, you can go for a basic and have it connected. But if you're a bigger organization, you have generations of gateway subnets out. Sorry, if you have generations of, let's say, virtual network gateway out here, and if you go for a generation 5, do you see what is the bandwidth that you're getting? 10 gbps per second. That's the reason, right? If you go on your VPN and go to the virtual machine and, let's say, download a movie or something, it'll just take you a second to download this. The reason being, the internet is super fast. And do you see what is the connections that you get here? 10,000 connections out there, meaning a maximum of 10,000 connections. And do you see what is the cost here? 300 rupees per an hour. If you use it for a day, meaning how much of cost you generate here? 300 into 24. If you use it for a month, 300 into 24 into 30 days. If you use it for a year, imagine what is the cost that you pay here. It's super costly. It's very costly. And the reason it is costly is because the security that it offers, the amount of security it offers out here as such. Again, you can display the price by an hour or a month or something like that. This is what it is charging you per a month. That is also what for the first 128 connections, it is charging you somewhere around 2 lakh rupees. From 129 to 10,000 connections, it is what? Around 1 rupee per an hour. Still, it's a cost. It's a cost per connection out here that you need to pay. The basic itself costs you around 2,000 rupees per month. But basic, again, it has a lot of issues. It doesn't properly configure. It's not really fine and all that stuff. But VPN Gateway 5, which is generation 5 out here that you have, this is the cost that you pay. Again, see, this cost might seem very high to us, but for a company, it is not. So if you're a company, if you're an MNC, it is not really high. It's actually very very cheaper out here as such. Yes, any more questions here, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here?
Suresh, Desai here.
Good, please.
Suresh, after referring to your email, the documents, I was able to do the virtual missions. With the virtual missions, I have created an image,
Okay.
and while I was deploying to RDP with only one virtual mission, we are deploying we have given a link to the end users. Okay, so
Hmm.
with that link, 10 members or 15 members can be accessible. We did
Okay.
not create 10 virtual missions, but
Okay.
with that link, all different people can access the with their login ID.
Okay.
Okay, so here the question is, I know we wanted to restrict only that link only for 2 weeks. I mean to say we have assigned a user role, and with those who have we have assigned, they'll only be able to log in. Okay,
Okay.
so we have given the training period for 2 weeks. After the
Okay.
2 weeks, if I wanted to disable that user using that link,
Okay.
how we do that?
See, again, that is something that comes under conditional access policies. You have to look at your conditional access policy that the organization is suggesting. You have to go into your directory, you have to go into the user, and you'll have to see what kind of an access the user has, and there you can give some conditions out there. So that comes under purely into active directory out there, where you can say that this particular user has only access to the next 2 weeks, and after that, the access kind of expires out here and something like that.
Okay, so
Again,
we need to go to
yeah,
the yeah.
yeah. Again, you need to check with your organization on what is the conditional access they have, on what kind of an access they have, and what kind of a domain controller they did implement in their side as such. So until and unless I don't see that, I won't be able to comment on that, telling what kind of an access policy they have and all these things out here.
Okay. What a difference between specialization and generalization? Usually on real environments, which one you will consider? Is it a generalization or I mean, it's the host pool we are created yesterday. So it doesn't took the specialization. Thereafter, we have to create one more VM and create an image, and again, then we created a specialization.
See, I don't know what is a specialization is. It's a term that I'm coming across for the first time. Generalization is preparing a virtual machine to be converted into an image. I am not too sure if there is something called a specialization out here, but I can look into it and I can let you know about that.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here? So my expectation is, guys, over the weekend, please demo this out. Okay, this will take some time to practice. If you have a free trial subscription, please go ahead demo this out here. First, listen to the entire video on what I'm doing, what I'm configuring, and all these things out. Doing that, you can go ahead and let's say install the VPN software on your machines and try this out here as such. Yes, any more questions here? All right, so that's it from mine today, guys. Please look at this. Please go through the video. Let me know if you have any challenges or any questions out here. Okay, please do that, and send out emails, or on the Monday session you can ask me questions on this one. Okay, thank you, guys. Have a good weekend ahead. Thank you.